All right. Couple things real quick. Appreciate you, first of all, being here. And I know that it's a little bit of a different Sunday school class, but I'm excited about it, and I'm ready to kick this series off. I know that there are more of you than I anticipated, so I didn't make enough copies of the lesson today. So I apologize for that. If you have if you're a couple and both of you have a copy that you can maybe give up, just lift it up real quick. Maybe if I get some guys to help me grab a few of these, and then we'll pass them around to maybe someone who didn't get one at all. And I apologize for that. That's a good problem to have when there's more than I thought we were going to have. So, all right. If you did not get a copy and you want one, please raise your hand. We'll have one of the guys get one of these out to you. Okay, this is Miss Twyla. A few over here. Okay. In the back there. All right, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, I think we're all about covered, and if someone maybe would keep a stack in the back, maybe John, if anybody comes in, the few extras that we have. Well, again, thank you for joining us at this adult combined Sunday school, and it does not happen often. And back in, I believe it was September, as I was kind of mapping out my Sunday school class series for the New Journey Sunday School class, I just felt impressed of the Lord to do a series about technology. And I know it's kind of the generation that I am in, and raising my children. I know that there's many like us that are trying to raise children in this age of technology, and sometimes you can feel overwhelmed about it. And so as I was mapping that out, I was talking to Mandy, and she said, well, maybe talk to Pastor. Maybe that's something that other classes would like to join in on. And so I talked to Pastor, and he thought it was a good idea. And so we're starting this series, Analog Parents Raising Digital Children. And just a short biography of myself, if you're not familiar with me. I'm on full-time staff at Hope Children's Home. And part of my job there is the administrative director, is to make sure that the policies and procedures are in place that ought to be there, specifically, amongst other things, as it deals with technology. And so as part of what I've done to help protect 70 to 80 children at Hope Children's Home is research these things out and tried for myself to be able to understand technology and put things in place to protect our children at Hope Children's Home. And also, in addition to that, I head up the IT for all of Hope Children's Home as well. So I've kind of got those two hats that have really forced me into knowing and understanding the digital age. And by no means am I an expert, but I told Pastor this when we were talking about it, that I don't mind studying things out, and I don't mind putting the time into researching them and sharing those things with you. So I'm not an expert, but I have spent some time and books and research to try to present to all of us just a practical way that we can deal with the digital age of technology. And so before we start talking and getting into tech words, though, I want to focus for a moment on His words, because that's the most important thing that we could do. We come to a series like this, and maybe you're a parent, maybe you're a grandparent, maybe you're just caring for children, and you're concerned about the children that's under your care, being able to protect them against this digital age of technology. And you come to a series like this, and maybe you think coming into it that I'm going to, or we're together going to figure out ways that we can always stay one step ahead of our children. And can I just tell you right up front that we will never be one step ahead of our children 100% of the time. Okay, so with every safeguard, with everything that we would put in place, with rules and policies and software and just good common sense type of things, at the end of the day, all of those things can be circumvented. At the end of the day, our children, teenagers and younger, they can get around these things that we put into place. So we're never going to be one step ahead of them 100% of the time. So I wanted you to understand that, because this brings me to the next point, that our most foundational method of parenting is always geared toward the heart. Our most foundational method of parenting has to always be geared toward the heart. You know, it's easy for us as parents to deal with the things that are seen and obvious. And so when we approach technology, oftentimes we say, okay, if we're going to have the internet in our house, we've got to have this measure in place. And if my child's going to have a cell phone, there's these rules, there's this software. We allow these apps, we don't allow these apps. And we're all too quick and easy to focus on those things, but we fail to reach their heart. We fail to reach their heart. Proverbs 4, verse 23 says this, "Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life." Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. That idea there, out of it are the issues of life, has the idea of a wellspring. It has the idea of the water that flows from a spring, whether it's good or bad, comes from the source. It comes from the well. Many of you know I like to hike, and last July I was out in the Sierra Mountains in California, backpacking through Yosemite and a little bit beyond that. I think it was about the 5th day we were on the trail, and there were several of us in the room that were on that same trip. About the 5th day, we had woke up that morning, and we had camped just about on top of Sunrise Mountain, which is a beautiful place to camp. And we'd been on the trail 5 days. We had the dehydrated camp food for 5 days. We hadn't really seen much of civilization, and so it was kind of wearing on us a little bit, the trail. And you have those days. And so we were coming down. We took a short stop for lunch, and most of us took a nap that day by the lake there. And we were coming down. We were finishing up probably about 3/4 of our trip, and I noticed to the right-hand side of the trail there was a waterfall going off the edge of the cliff there. And I checked my water, and I was a little low on water, so I decided to stop there and just to refill on water and see what was the situation with the water. So I went over to it, and I'll tell you, I still can vividly see this in my mind. As I looked to the waterfall, I followed the water up to see if I could see where this water was coming from. And as I did, I found the actual source of that waterfall. And it was just a natural spring, and you could literally, the guys that were there, you could literally see the spring, the water just bubbling up out of the ground. And so I put my hand down in the water, and it was just ice cold. I filled my water bottle up with it, and I have a clear water bottle, and I held it up to the sun. I mean, it was just pristine, crystal clear. You could not have filtered it or bought a bottle of water off the shelf any more clear. I took that first sip, and it was hot, and I had been weary from the trail, and I just remember how refreshing that glass of water fresh out of the spring was. It was so ice cold, I don't know how it wasn't even frozen. I mean, it was just awesome. Now, contrast that with a couple of weeks earlier, some of us in here were doing a trip in Myakka River State Park. And if you've ever been hiking there, it's the total opposite. They do have a couple water sources that the park had drilled, short wells, and we would go, and some of you would remember this, the old pumps where you had to put a little water in the top to prime it, and then you pump it. There were 2 of those on the trail within the 26-mile loop that we did in those 2 days. And we'd go to those the first time we got to the source, and we'd get the water pumped, and we'd notice it was coming out real orange and just dingy. And we fill our water bottle up with it and hold it up, and I mean, it was just nasty. Orange, sediment all in it. Of course, we have filters and filtration devices, and we ran it through everything. Filter, double filter, we each traded filters, seeing whose was the best filter. But no matter what we did to that water, we could not get it clear, no matter what. And that wasn't even the bad part. The bad part was when we drank the water, and it was just horrible. It tasted like sulfur water, rotten eggs, not refreshing. I mean, just no matter what we did, we could not get that taste out of our mouth. But we had to. It was our only source of water. It was safe because we filtered it and we had the proper filtrations, but it didn't taste good. It wasn't a good experience. You take those 2 things, and that's kind of what this verse is talking about here. The Bible says, "Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life." You see, our children, we have to parent them with our primary method is gearing toward their hearts. Because from their heart, the Bible says, are the issues of life. What comes from their heart is what's going to spring out into their actions and into their attitude and into what they do with technology. And you see, if we go around and all we try to do is just filter the water, so to speak, we just try to put boundaries and do what we can with the issues that are coming from this stinking heart, we're never going to be able to fully put all the boundaries around it that we need to. So let me just say this. When we talk about digital age and analog parenting, raising digital children, let me just tell you that the first thing we have to do is reach our children's hearts. Before we start talking tech terms, before we start putting things into place, let me ask you this as a parent, are you and I reaching our children's heart? Are we pointing them to have a pure and genuine relationship, a personal relationship with their own God? Are we teaching them to pursue things that are pure and lovely and honest and just and of good report? That has to be the foundation for our parenting. You see, we can't just run around and hope to filter all the dirty water, so to speak. We want to start with the source to begin with that's pure, as pure as it could be. And when we start from there, we'll have a lot less issues. Mark 7:21 says, "For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, and so on." And it says, all these evil things come from within and defile the man. Luke 6:45 says this, "A good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good. And an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is evil." Listen to this, "For of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh." And we could go on, but the point here is this, is that the heart is the control center for life. Our heart is, so to speak, our control center for life. And you might be thinking, okay, well, if my primary job as the parent is to reach this child's heart, then why do we have to have boundaries? Why do we even talk about putting safeguards into place? Well, the second point there on your handouts is this. Boundaries are necessary because the heart alone cannot be trusted. The heart alone cannot be trusted. Jeremiah 17 verse 9 says it this way, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?" The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? You see, in and of ourselves, we still live in this flesh. We still have the temptation of the flesh. And even though we can pursue a personal relationship with God, and we can pursue things that are pure in our own lives, and we can teach our children to do such things, we have to remember that our heart is desperately wicked, and our heart's deceitful above all things. And so with reaching the heart, we must place boundaries. Let me illustrate it like this. Let's say you have a 15-year-old. Anyone have a 15-year-old here? Okay. Wow, no 15-year-old. Okay. Let's say you had a 15 or 16-year-old child, and it's about time for them to start driving. Now, here in Florida, we have many bridges. We have the Gandy Bridge, the Howard Franklin, the Courtney Campbell Causeway, the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. What if, for the first time as a parent, we walk over to our child, hand them the keys to our car, and we say, "All right, here you go, Johnny. You've never had a driving lesson. I've never taught you how to drive. You don't have a license, but here's the keys to the car. I want you to go down the Howard Franklin Bridge and go 70 miles per hour and just go down the bridge." I mean, you get from one side to the other. And they might say, "Well, I don't know how to drive." Wouldn't it be foolish to say that and then to say this? Well, listen, you don't know how to drive. On the Howard Franklin, they have these guardrails on both sides. You'll be fine. I mean, people, that's what they're there for. You don't have to know how to drive. You just go. The guardrails will keep you safe. And the lack of intelligence that you would have as a parent to do that is obviously, it's kind of comical. But then sometimes we approach things like the digital age of technology that way, where we'll say, okay, I'm going to put safeguards into place, and I'm going to put boundaries, I'm going to put guardrails, so to speak, but we fail to reach their heart. We fail to teach them right from wrong. We fail to teach them to pursue God in their own personal way and to pursue things that are true and pure. But we think we're okay because we've got safeguards and we've got boundaries. So the third point there in your notes is this, is that behavior change without a heart change is futile, pointless. No practical, useful purpose of a behavior change that does not include a heart change. One author said it this way, "A change in behavior that does not stem from a change in heart is not commendable, it's condemnable." In other words, sometimes we have the tendency as parents to polish up our children. We dress them the right way. We send them to church. They oftentimes will be in front of the church many times. We try to raise them as a servant. We try to do all the right things, the right look, the right haircut, the right talk, but we fail to reach their hearts. Matthew says it this way, Matthew chapter 15, verse 8, says, "This people draweth nigh unto me with their mouth, and honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me." Please don't misunderstand the aim of this series. Please don't misunderstand the purpose of this series. It's not so that we can only find ways to put boundaries and safeguards for our children. If that's all we're doing, we might be able to change their behavior. We might be able to polish them enough to where they look good, but it has to start with their heart. And I'm not focusing on that for this series. That's a totally different series. But it has to start with that. And I did want to mention that. I have a book here. this would be the book that I recommend, Shepherding a Child's Heart by Ted Tripp. If you've never read this book as a parent, get this book, please. It's a good book. That's exactly what it speaks to. I think you can probably get this off of Amazon for less than $10. But if you, before you start the series, and if you've never read that book, read it this week. Get it. I'm sure you can get it on Kindle or some kind of other electronic means where you can have it this week and read it, because that's where this thing starts. And so we see here the aim of the series is to educate and equip parents to place enough boundaries in their child's digital life so that their children will have to fervently work to get into trouble. And I put it that way on purpose. If we as parents were reaching our children's hearts and we're teaching them what's right and wrong, and we're teaching them about a personal relationship with God, that's the first part of it. But we couple that with boundaries and with safeguards, and with this class, hopefully, in the next 4 weeks, we'll learn ways to where if your children want to get in trouble, they're going to have to work at it. In other words, they're not going to accidentally come across something they shouldn't come across on the internet. They're not going to accidentally get in trouble with their cell phones and texting. They're not going to accidentally get in trouble on social media. If they're going to get in trouble, they're going to have to work for it. They're going to have to circumvent the rules and policies and procedures that you've put in place as a parent. You know what? That will tell you right there. If we put policies and we put things into place and safeguards in our home and our children are still getting around it, that tells you as a parent you don't have their heart. You've not reached their heart. And all you're trying to do is you're trying to take that Miyako nasty water and filter it out and hope for the best, but you'll never get the water like we experienced in California that's cool and refreshing and a pleasure to drink. So you have to start with the source. And so with this, we begin our first lesson. That was all introduction. We're going to look here, first of all, today at the internet. And I started here because it's one of the game changers in technology. It really is. Roman numeral number 1 there in your notes, the dangers of the internet. Now, I could just bombard you with statistics and things, but I just picked a few that I wanted us to really zone in on for this discussion this morning. The dangers of the internet. Did you know that 70% of children ages 7 to 18 have accidentally encountered online pornography? 70% have accidentally encountered online pornography. And those are ages 7 to 18. Man, I have a 7-year-old, and I would just be mortified if I knew that he had accidentally come across pornography on the internet. I mean, that would just blow my mind. 70% have accidentally. 90% of children ages 8 to 16 have seen online pornography. Now, this isn't just accidental. This includes accidental and on purpose. 90% ages 8 to 16. You can see the statistics there. Letter C. The largest group of internet porn consumers is children ages 12 to 17. You think of online pornography, you think of some dirty old men, or you think of, the husband that's, up late at night when his wife's asleep. That's what your mind thinks about when you think online pornography. But did you know that the largest consumer of online pornography is children ages 12 to 17? That's our children. That's our kids. This is mind-blowing here. These are 2014 statistics, a few of them here. 2014, so that's the last year that we would have full statistics because 2015 just ended. In 2014, the total porn visits were 18.35 billion. 18.35 billion. Think about that for a minute. I mean, that word just comes across our tongue so easily, but what is a billion? It's a million times 1,000, right? I mean, that's a lot. 18.35 billion in 1 year. Secondly, in 2014, the number of pornographic videos viewed, 78.9 billion. In parentheses there, that's 11 videos for every man, woman, child in the entire globe. That's number of videos viewed of pornography in 1 year. If that's not staggering, listen to this, the third part to that. These numbers are just from one internet porn site. This isn't all of them. These statistics here, this is just one internet porn site. There's 175 million internet pornography websites. So you do the math. Can you understand the epidemic that's in our society today because of the internet? And as parents, we say, well, it's the digital age. Let's call Verizon or let's call Bright House and let's get the internet into our house. Do you understand that you invite all of this into your home as well? There's plenty of good on the internet, but did you understand that you invite all of this on the internet as well? And I'm just talking here for a moment just about this pornography problem. But that's not the only issue with the internet. There's cyberbullying, there's scams, phishing, there's violence, crime, gambling. They have a connection to all of the Hollywood crowd and their philosophies of life. I mean, they're just bombarded with all of these things. Did you know that law enforcement officials estimate that in any given moment there's 50,000 sexual predators online? 50,000 sexual predators, and those are the ones they know about, the registered sexual predators, 50,000 of them at any given moment on the internet. Listen, the internet is a scary place for our children. It is a very scary place for our children. Here's the last statistic on this, that only 1/3 of households have internet protection software. Only about 1/3 of our households that have internet have protection software in place. So we see all the statistics of how the dangers of the internet are there, and we understand that, we know it. We may not have known the statistics, but we knew there's problems as parents. But yet we have the internet into our home, which isn't a bad thing. But then only 1/3 of us are putting protections into place to keep our kids and our spouses and ourselves from getting into something on the internet that they ought not to have. Listen, I want to say from this series that we ought to, in this room, if nowhere else, by taking this series, we ought to change that statistic from 1/3 to 100%. I mean, if you have the internet in your home, it needs to have some type of filter on it for your protection, for your spouse's protection, and for your children's protection. And so we see here the dangers of the internet. Let's look at the Roman numeral number 2, and we'll spend a little bit of time on this morning. Protecting your family from the internet. You say, well, Brother Matt, that's a lot of doom and gloom. We already know the internet can be a bad thing. It can be a real bad tool. What do we do about it? Okay, and that's what I want to do with this series each week. We'll take a topic like this, and we'll figure out good ways, practical, common sense ways to put some protections into place. So Roman numeral number 2, protecting your family from the internet. I would say, first of all, letter A, that we need to set and communicate clear rules about using the internet. So we decided one day as parents, we'll call Verizon or we'll call Bright House and we'll get internet into our home. Did we ever take the very first step is to sit down with our children and just talk to them about the internet? Do you have rules in place? I'm not talking about software. I'm just talking about just house rules. How do we use the internet? If you don't, that's something that you and your spouse need to sit down and talk about and communicate with each other, and then communicate it to your children so that they clearly know what the guides are for using internet in your house. I wrote down just a couple questions. There's plenty of more topics to discuss. I wrote down a few that maybe get overlooked. Number 1 there, do your children need to ask permission each time they go online? That's something you and your spouse need to decide. Let me tell you this, as a safeguard, I would recommend that they should. If your children are getting on the internet, you should know about it. And if my children are getting on the internet, I want to know what I want to know. So I would require children, teenagers, to ask before they get online. That way you as a parent are aware. You may not be right over their shoulder watching everything they're doing, but at least you know that they're online. You know to be a little bit more aware of it. And you all are smart on this. By the way, if you walk in the room and you hear click, 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 and the screen changes real quick, that's a good indicator that they're probably somewhere they ought not to be. But at least if you know that they're online, you know to look a little bit closer at those things. And you know that you can tiptoe and step into the room a little bit quieter where they don't hear your feet on the floor and things like that. So ask yourself, should they ask permission? Secondly, what purpose will you allow your children to use the internet for? Please don't just give your children free rein to the internet, filter or not, for any purpose that they want. This idea of surfing the net can get your children into trouble. By the way, it can get us into trouble too. For our children, they need to have a purpose. Why are you want to get online? Sure. What's the purpose? What are you doing? Well, I just want to get online. No. you need to have a purpose. What is it? Do you have a research paper? Is there something you're trying to look up? Sports statistics? Pinterest, whatever it is, but what's the purpose? You're not just going to get on there and surf around and then just see what's on the internet. So I would encourage us all as parents to, number one, have our children ask permission, and then the second question should be, well, what are you getting on there for? What's your purpose? And that way you can kind of set the parameters in that moment for where they ought to be, where they ought not to be. Another question you might think about and consider is, where in the house can they have the internet access? Probably not a good idea to put a computer in their room and allow them to get online with the door closed. Just too many temptations there. I would say if your children, number one, are asking for permission, you know why they're on the internet, I think it needs to be in a public place. That's kind of a lot of the problem. We'll talk about that when we get to some other pieces of technology. But our children's lives have become so private. When I was growing up, if my friends called to talk to me on the phone, they usually talked to my parents first, and we had one phone. It was in the kitchen, and my parents heard everything that we were talking about on the phone. We were always in earshot. Now kids have texting and cell phones and internet and tablets, and they're in this corner and this, No. If you want to be online, have a purpose, ask permission, and you're going to do it in the living room or the kitchen where, as I'm walking past, I can see what's going on and keep an eye shot in there. Fourth one, will there be time limits and or non-use times? In other words, you might say, hey, you can get online. You have to ask for permission. I'll know what you're doing. But regardless, you have an hour time limit or 30 minutes or whatever the case may be. I don't make a recommendation on that. That's between you and your family. But I would say this, are there times of non-use? In other words, are there times where you would say, hey, it's off the table no matter what? After 10 o'clock p.m., you're not going to be online. Before 6 a.m., whatever the case may be. But those are things you need to think about. I would even encourage you to write them down, communicate them to your children. That way you're all on the same page and you know. And then the fifth one is, what material is appropriate to you? Do you want your children looking at sports statistics? Do you want them checking out the latest Hollywood trends and stories? Do you want them looking at Pinterest? There may not be anything wrong with any of those things, but that's where you as a parent have to decide what's appropriate, what do you want your child to look at, and communicate that to them. So let's look here. That was all under set and communicate clear rules. Okay, so we've now set the rules, and all together we're working toward their heart. In addition to that, we're setting the rules of the house. But then the second is installing some type of a web filtering software, utilize filtering software. And for this, I really want to spend the next few minutes and just to help us understand this. And this might be elementary to you. If you're a tech-savvy person, I'm not going to get real in-depth in this. But I do want to hope that we can all walk away understanding at least a little bit about this. And so web filtering software really is going to be two different types. And I've really just kind of put this out real plain and easy for us. And I've narrowed it down to really just putting them in two different categories, two different types. There's what we would call router-based software and device-based software. Okay, write those terms down, and I'll explain them. If that doesn't make any sense to you, in 10 minutes, I promise you it will. Router-based software or device-based software. Okay, so let me explain a little bit about the two. So I brought with me from my house, this is a router, okay? This is from Verizon. This is right out of my house, so I don't have internet in my house right now. This is what they call a router. So for you to understand this, if you have internet, like I said, you've called Verizon, Bright House. Does anyone have something other than Verizon or Bright House that provides you internet? They call them the internet service provider. Okay, I figured it was one of those two. So you have internet through Verizon or Bright House. You've called them. They've came and they've given you a connection to the outside world, the internet. It's just 800 and some million registered domains that are out there worldwide now is connected into your home through a cable, really in essence. A lot of them use fiber optics now, but let's just, for purposes of making it easy, let's just say that this computer Ethernet cable represents the internet from the outside world going into your home, okay? So this goes, and this plugs in, this is the internet, it plugs into your router, okay? So now what the router does is it takes the traffic from inside your house, whether through Wi-Fi with the antennas, if you have Wi-Fi, or without Wi-Fi, it's all through cabling. But either way, when someone in your house, you, your wife, your children, a neighbor, someone that's in your house, when they make a request to go to a website or to use the internet in any way, it comes first to your home's router, okay? So when I say router-based filtering software, we're talking about software that is utilized inside your router. And the purpose of that is so that no matter who or no matter what is on your network, it has to pass through the software to get to the internet, okay? So let me illustrate this. Let me get a couple. Paul, would you mind coming on up real quick? Paul's going to be the internet, okay? We hold that cable and come way over there. And then let me get Richie. Would you mind coming on up? Richie's going to be router, all right, Mr. Router. Come on over here. Okay, so Richie's here, and come on over here close to him. And then you go way over here because you're the outside. You're the internet, all right? And so when you call, you have the internet hooked up. They come, they hook up to your house. Now the internet's inside your house, okay? Device or web or router-based filtering software, I'll represent the filter, okay? So I'm here, and I don't want to hug him, but nobody's getting to Mr. Router without going through Mr. Web Filter, okay? That's how tight we are. So let me get a couple of others. Paul, if you wouldn't mind coming up, and Lou, would you mind coming on up? And Brother Jerry, would you mind coming on up? So I brought with me a couple things here, a couple devices that we'll let represent. Okay, so we'll let Mr. Paul here. He'll represent tablets, okay? And we brought an iPhone. Lou will be Mr. iPhone. Brother Jerry will be Mr. Laptop. And let's see here. We have iPads. We have all these different devices that we might have. Now, when you have a router-based filtering software, it doesn't matter if Paul tries to come and connect to the internet. It has to go through your router, remember. He tries to come and connect, but I'm here, okay? So I'm the link between these two. And then if Lou wants to come on over here, join us too, man. Join hands. There you go. Yeah, and Brother Jerry. So no matter how, if you're on your laptop, if you're on your iPhone through Wi-Fi, if you're on your tablet, all of them have to come through me, the web filter, when it's on this router-based software. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the first type. The second type is device-based software. It's kind of the flip-flop mentality. It's where me as the web filter, now I'm installed over here on the laptop, okay? And as long as the laptop is being used that I'm attached to, it's still connecting to the router, but it's filtered because it's on the laptop. Now the problem is this, that while I'm here with Brother Jerry on the laptop, Lou's on his iPhone, Paul's on his tablet, they're connecting over there with no filter, okay, because it's per device. Now, there's benefits of both. I'm sure you can obviously already pick them up in your mind. Device-based has to be per device. And by the way, maybe many of you know, but you would be floored to know how many devices connect to the internet. Your smart TVs, most of your gaming systems now, your portable gaming systems, even little toddler electronic toys connect to the internet. And so we have all these devices, and if you go with a device-based software, you have to get it on every single device, and it has to be compatible across Windows operating system, Mac operating system, Windows tablet operating system, and so you can run into compatibility issues. So, all right, thank you guys. You can all be seated. That works. Yeah, you can keep it. It's Brittany's anyways. You can keep it. So there's the two differences. Now let's look just a little bit about these with our last few minutes here. So inside of our router, let's look at the router-based software. You might say, well, what's the best? I mean, how do we choose which option? And I would say this, a combination of both is what I recommend. Okay, so on your router, right from the factory, there's software built into your router. How many of you have ever signed into your router and looked at that software before? Raise your hand. Okay, just a few of you, okay? So every router that comes out already has software built into it. They call it firmware, okay? So with that, now each one's different, so there's no way that I could explain to you exactly how it works and exactly what to do. But we can log into this router, and with the software that comes right from the factory, we can do a couple things. One of them is this. So we are, in your notes, we're under number 1, router-based, letter A, factory-installed software, number 1 underneath there. Limit unwanted people from connecting to your router. So the first job is, let's limit who we want, the people that we want connecting to that. Easiest way to do that is to set a password for your Wi-Fi. How many of you have a password on your Wi-Fi? Okay. Most of the time nowadays, even when they install it for you from Verizon or Bright House, they put a password on there for you. 5 years ago, they didn't even do that. Okay. So most of the time now, they've automatically put a password on there for you. So that's kind of old news. That's not going to catch a lot of people. So make sure you have a password on your Wi-Fi. If you don't have a password on your Wi-Fi, not only are you opening up your internet to people that you don't want, your neighbors. I've heard of people stealing Wi-Fi from their neighbors, people driving around their neighborhood just to find a free Wi-Fi. And these things are kind of less happening now that Starbucks and McDonald's and everyone else is offering free Wi-Fi. But there was a time when that was a big deal. So we log in there, put a password on. That'll help keep unwanted people from using your internet. Another thing you can do, and not a lot of people do that, just an extra layer of protection, is that you can, I think it's number 2 underneath there, consider hiding your SSID. How many of you know what an SSID is? Okay, a few of you. That's just a fancy term for the name of your Wi-Fi. So if you go to my house and you pulled up your iPad and you were trying to see if I had Wi-Fi, you would see my Wi-Fi is named Higgins Home. Okay, it's what they call, it's broadcasted. In other words, it doesn't matter who you are, red, yellow, black, or white, as long as you've got a device that connects to the Wi-Fi, they can see that term, Higgins Home. What you can do through your routers, you can hide that, where it's still Wi-Fi, just as the Wi-Fi as anything else, but the router doesn't broadcast that name out there. You say, well, what does that do for me? Well, in order for someone to connect to that internet, they have to know the exact name of your Wi-Fi. In other words, they'd have to go to my home and know that it's called Higgins Home, and they'd have to literally type that in there, Higgins Home, and then they would have to figure out the password on top of it. So it's kind of like a double layer of protection. Here in this auditorium, there's Wi-Fi. If you pull up your iPhone, you won't see a Wi-Fi signal per se because the SSID is not broadcasted in here, so that people we don't want aren't connecting to the Wi-Fi in here. So that's something that we can use, and it's a tool there that you can use if you want. I don't do that at my house. I just have a password. And by the way, make your password strong. Don't make it something that children or anybody else can guess. I would say by a minimum recommendation of 8 characters, a capital letter, a number, and a symbol. You say, isn't that overboard? No, not really. Because your children are smart. You know they are. They can guess that password, and they can just keep trying and keep trying and keep trying until they get it. So make it complex enough where they're not going to get it. Number 2 there, limit unwanted devices from connecting to your router. So now we've dealt with the people, the knowledge. Through your router software built in already, we can stop devices entirely from connecting. There's 2 different ways. One's called a whitelist, the other's called a blacklist. Simply put, a whitelist is where you go into your router and you tell them, only allow these certain devices. In other words, you tell your router, only allow dad's laptop, mom's tablet, and that's it. Nothing else. If you're not one of those 2 devices, you don't get to the internet. That's called a whitelist. The opposite mentality is a blacklist, where you go in and you say to the router, configure it to say, I don't care who you are, anybody can connect if they know the password to the Wi-Fi, except for, and then you can name certain devices. So if your children have maybe a mobile gaming device and you don't want them ever to get on the internet at your house, you can go into your router and you can tell it never, ever, ever allow that device to connect to the internet. It's called a blacklist. You say, well, how do we do all that? That sounds good, but how do I do it? If you see me after class, I wrote out for you a basic general guideline of how to configure your router. Now, again, there's so many different types of routers. They're all different, but they, in essence, work the same way. So this could give you some ideas, and combine this with some Google searches, and I'm confident that you could figure out how to combine that router or configure it on your own. And then the third part is to control device activity through parental controls. That may not be a part of your router's factory software. With Verizon and this particular router, it is. There is a parental controls on there, and you can go in there and tell it things like, only allow this device to connect to the internet during this time, or only allow it to connect for 1 hour a day. There's many different, it's pretty basic. It's not real high-tech, but you can do that there. So that's all. You can do everything we've talked about, most likely from what you already have in your house. No extra cost, no extra things to download. It's already there. You just need to learn how to configure it. So take the paper from me after class. You can learn how to configure it. That'll help you out immensely, keeping devices off your network that you don't want there. Now, there are third-party software, which is in your notes. In addition to this firmware, you can have a router-based software solution that will, in essence, work the exact same way. The one I recommend is called OpenDNS. It's there in your notes, the link to download it. It's a free download for personal use, which we would all be using it for personal use. And it, in essence, filters from the router level. In other words, it doesn't matter who you are, what you are. If you're on your router, that software is going to see your activity, and it's going to filter it. The nice thing about OpenDNS is it is a full-blown web filter. There's 27 different web categories, such as crime, violence, pornography, dating websites, social media. They're all categorized, and you as a parent can go in and say, okay, they can see sports, but they can't see dating sites. Or they can see this category, but they can't see this category. And so that's all available to you as well. Go to opendns.com. Instructions are there. It's a very simple, easy download, and it will work in conjunction with whatever filter or whatever software settings you have placed on your router. And then before we end here, let's look at the second type of web filtering software. It's the device-based. So it's the one that you have to actually install on your devices. So here's my laptop. The only one that not the only, but the one I highest recommend is called NetNanny. Now it's there in your notes, the website there, and anytime you're dealing with device-based software, most likely you're going to incur an expense. Part of having the internet in your house, I've heard people say that they're reluctant to put that on there because it costs money. Well, you don't mind paying your monthly payment for your internet, but then we want to bulk sometimes at putting software in place, even though it's $50, $100. At the children's home, we literally spend multiple thousands of dollars, many thousands of dollars every single year just to put software into place to protect our children. It's a big expense. For personal use, not such a big expense, but it will cost something. So third-party software for device-based, my recommendation is NetNanny. Go to netnanny.com. It is cross-platform. So in other words, you can use it on Windows. You can use it on Mac operating system. You can use it on Android. Now here's the downfall to NetNanny is you cannot use it right now on iOS, iPhones. I'll talk about iPhone filtering at a different time. So as far as encompassing most of the devices in our home, NetNanny will work for you. You buy it per device. It's $40 for one device, $60 for 5 devices, $90 for 10 devices. And I don't know, maybe many of us don't have more than 10 devices. So at the most, you're talking maybe about $90. I did notice this week that they are running a promotion. If you buy that 10 device package, that they'll give you another software for free. It's called NetNanny Social, and we'll talk about that when we deal with social media. And so if you're contemplating that, I don't know when the promotion ends, it doesn't say, but if you're contemplating downloading and buying NetNanny, do it this week so you can get the NetNanny Social, which we'll talk about in a couple weeks when we deal with social media. But with that said, that's just the one I recommend for personal use. There are many options out there, and I gave you 2 links that you can pull up on your own that give you reviews. I think both of those links take like top 10 reviews from this particular magazine or publication, and they give their top pick. NetNanny is on both of them. I think it's the top pick on one of them. Let me say this. There are free software versions out there, but you get what you pay for when you go for free, okay? Not saying it's a bad option, but you do get what you pay for when you go for free. So when we deal with the internet, we talked about the dangers of the internet. We see all the things that we invite into our home. Hey, let's change that statistic. Let's not have just let's not have just this section over here have filtering software. This week, make it a priority in your homes. Check out what your policies are in your own home for your internet. Do you have a router-based software solution, which I think you should? Do you have a device-based software solution, which I think you should? They're not going to conflict with each other as long as you do them and configure them the proper ways, and you can Google it and all that kind of stuff. It can literally walk you through it. I do all the IT stuff at the children's home, and I've never one time taken an IT class. I didn't go to college for that, but I do some pretty big things at the children's home. The only way I do that is through Google, okay? I'm telling you my secret right now. So Google is your best friend. If you get stuck on something and you don't know how it works, Google it, find it out. It will help you. Don't forget, if you're interested, to pick up one of these to help you to configure your router this week. And we'll look back next week. We're going to look at more specifically some of the devices that we talked about and parental controls and ways to protect even the devices so that your children are safe in this digital age. Let's go ahead and pray, and then after we pray, you can come and get these if you'd like. Lord, we thank you so much for all that you do for us. God, we're thankful for the series that we have, Lord, and just ask that you would bless. Help us as parents to be smart, to be aware of what our children are doing, Lord, and help us to put just logical, common sense things into place to help our children, help their relationship with the Lord by not allowing them to stumble into things that they shouldn't get into. And Lord, just ask for wisdom as parents and be with the next hour to come. And we ask all this in your name we pray. Amen.